My name is Jake, and I'm 29. For most of my adult life, I've been the guy my family relied on, the dependable one, the problem solver, the one who always stepped up when someone needed help. And for the longest time, I didn't mind. That's just who I was. But after what my brother, Ryan, did to me, I realized that being the good guy only gets you walked all over. Ryan is 26, 3 years younger than me, and he's always had it easy. Growing up, my parents spoiled him rotten while I was expected to be the responsible one. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And I was the one who had to clean up his messes. When he dropped out of college after a year, my parents barely batted an eye. He said school wasn't for him, and they just accepted it, no questions asked. He bounced from job to job, quitting when things got too stressful. But despite his complete lack of work ethic, he always had the latest gadgets, designer clothes, and a car that was way out of his budget. And that's where I came in. See, about 4 years ago, Ryan hit what he called his rough patch. He had just lost another job and was facing eviction. My parents, who had already spent a fortune bailing him out of bad decisions, refused to help. So, like a fool, I stepped in. I had been working 2 jobs at the time, one as a sales manager during the day and another doing freelance IT work at night. It was exhausting, but I was saving up for a future where I wouldn't have to struggle. Ryan knew this, but instead of respecting it, he begged me for help. Said he just needed a little boost to get back on his feet. That boost turned into me covering his rent. And not just for a month or two. It became a regular thing. I kept paying, month after month, always believing that at some point, he'd get it together. He never did. Instead, he got comfortable. Too comfortable. I watched as he turned my hard-earned money into his personal play fund. He wasn't scraping by, he was living better than me. Fancy dinners, weekend trips, expensive sneakers, he had it all. I knew he wasn't making money on his own, but any time I confronted him about it, he'd brush me off. Relax, man. I'll pay you back when I get my big break. That was Ryan's favorite phrase. My big break. He always had some excuse for why he wasn't working a real job. One month, he was building his brand as an influencer. The next, he was getting into crypto. Then it was some half-baked startup idea that never went anywhere. And through it all, I kept paying. I don't know why I let it go on for so long. Maybe because deep down, I still saw him as my little brother, the same kid I used to protect when we were younger. But looking back, I was just enabling him. And it wasn't until one humiliating night that I finally woke up. It happened at a family dinner. It had been a long week. I was exhausted from work, but my mom insisted that we all get together at her place. These dinners were a regular thing, a way for the family to stay connected. I wasn't really in the mood, but I went anyway, figuring it would be nice to see everyone. I should have stayed home. The night started off fine. We were eating, chatting, the usual. Ryan, as always, was bragging about nonsense. This time, it was about some girl he was talking to and how she only dated high-value men. He went on and on about how some people would never understand what it's like to be successful because they settle for mediocre lives. At first, I ignored it. Ryan was always full of himself. But then he turned to me smirking. Like Jake, for example. Dude works 2 jobs just to afford basic stuff. Meanwhile, I get to live my life however I want. That's the difference between winners and losers. Losers. He called me a loser. Me, the one who had been keeping a roof over his head for years. I felt my face heat up. I let out a short laugh, thinking he had to be joking. You're kidding, right? Ryan just shrugged. I mean, it's kinda sad, don't you think? Working yourself to death while I'm out enjoying life. The room went silent. My mom gasped. My dad just shook his head. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity. The complete lack of gratitude. After everything I had done for him, this was how he saw me? I clenched my fists under the table. I could have blown up at him right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I forced a smile and nodded. Yeah, you're right, Ryan. It is sad. And just like that, I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just made a silent decision. That was the last month I ever paid his rent. The next day, I called his landlord and told him that Ryan was on his own. No more payments from me. No more covering his bills. I cut off everything, his phone, his car insurance, even the emergency credit card I had stupidly put in my name for him. Ryan didn't realize it at first. He was too busy living his high-value lifestyle. But when the rent came due, reality hit him like a truck. And the best part? I didn't say a word. I let him figure it out on his own. I ignored his calls, his texts, all of it. It wasn't until a week later that he finally snapped. That's when the real chaos started. Ryan showed up at my apartment unannounced, pounding on the door like a lunatic. It was late, past midnight, and I had just gotten home from a long shift. The second I opened the door, he shoved his way inside, his face red with frustration. Dude, what is wrong with you? My landlord says rent wasn't paid. My car insurance got canceled. My phone bill is overdue. What's going on? I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and watched him lose it. It was actually kind of satisfying. I stopped paying. His eyes widened. What? I stopped paying, I repeated, slow and deliberate. You said it yourself, remember? I'm just a loser working myself to death. So why would I waste my hard-earned money on someone who's too successful to work? His face twitched. Dude, I was joking. You know, I don't actually think that, I scoffed. No, Ryan. You weren't joking. You were showing your true colors. And guess what? You made your bed. Now lie in it. He blinked a few times, his mind clearly scrambling for a way out of this. Jake, he tried, his voice suddenly softer. Come on, man. You can't just do this to me. I need that money. I tilted my head. Oh, need it? Funny, because I thought you were a winner, and I was just a loser, working 2 jobs. I figured you'd have plenty of money saved up. His jaw clenched. Dude, stop being petty. Just cover this month's rent, and I swear I'll figure things out. I laughed, actually laughed in his face. Yeah, no, you're on your own. That's when he lost it. You're seriously going to do this to me? His voice got louder, angrier. After everything I've done for you? I raised an eyebrow. Everything you've done for me? I repeated, incredulous. Ryan, what exactly have you done for me? He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I'm your brother, he said, as if that was enough of an answer. I shook my head. That's not how this works, man. You don't get to treat people like garbage and then expect them to keep supporting you. Welcome to the real world. For a second, he just stood there, breathing hard. Then, out of nowhere, he changed tactics. His whole demeanor shifted, his face contorting into something bitter. You think you're better than me now, huh? He sneered. Just because you have a stupid job and some money saved up? I don't think I'm better than you, Ryan. I know I am. That set him off. His fist clenched, and for a second, I thought he might actually try to swing at me. But instead, he just let out this humorless laugh and took a step back. All right, fine, he said. You want to play this game? You want to leave me out in the cold? Watch what happens. I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He smirked, but there was no humor in it. You'll see. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him so hard the walls shook. I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Something about the way he said it put me on edge. I had no idea what Ryan was planning, but I had a feeling this wasn't over. And I was right. Because 3 days later, my mom called me in a panic. What did you do to your brother? She demanded the second I picked up. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? She sighed dramatically. He's staying with us now because he says you kicked him out onto the streets. I closed my eyes and exhaled through my nose. Mom, I didn't kick him out. I just stopped paying for his lifestyle. Well, now he has nothing, Jake, she snapped. No apartment, no car, no money. How could you do this to your own brother? I let out a dry laugh. Mom, I didn't do anything. He did this to himself. He said you were being cruel, she shot back. That you're punishing him for no reason. I shook my head, feeling the anger rise in my chest. Of course, Ryan spun the story to make himself the victim. I gripped the phone tightly. Mom, let me ask you something. Has Ryan told you where all his money was going while I was paying his rent? Has he mentioned the designer clothes? The expensive dinners? The weekend getaways? Silence. I continued. Because that's where my money went. Not to a struggling brother who was trying to get back on his feet. To a lazy, entitled brat who spent it all on himself. More silence. Then, in a quieter voice, she said, well, he's family, Jake. You don't just abandon family. And there it was. The same excuse my parents had always used to justify his behavior. The same reason they had never held him accountable. I let out a long breath. Mom, I love you. But I'm done being Ryan's ATM. If you want to support him, that's your choice. But I'm out. I hung up before she could argue. I sat down, my heart still pounding. I knew this was going to get worse before it got better. And I was right. Because the next morning, I woke up to dozens of angry messages from relatives. Ryan had really gone all out this time. And he wasn't just playing the victim. He was playing dirty. The flood of messages was unreal. My phone buzzed nonstop: texts, missed calls, voicemails, even emails from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Apparently, Ryan had spun the most insane sob story imaginable. According to him, I had heartlessly abandoned him, leaving him homeless and penniless on the streets with nowhere to go. He was desperate, starving, and begging for help while his cold-hearted brother sat back and laughed at his suffering. Somehow, in his version of events, he had been the hard-working sibling who had sacrificed everything for me, and this was how I repaid him. And the worst part? People actually believed him. My aunt left a furious voicemail. "I always knew you were selfish, Jake. But this is just disgusting. Ryan is your family, and you left him to suffer. I hope you can live with yourself." My cousin texted, "Dude, I don't even know what to say. How could you do that to Ryan? He's your brother." My grandmother of all people emailed me, "Jakey, sweetheart, I'm so disappointed in you. Your poor brother has nowhere to go, and you won't even lift a finger to help him? Family should always come first." Message after message, all saying the same thing: how heartless I was, how Ryan was suffering, how I needed to make this right. I was furious. He had lied to everyone, painted me as some evil villain, and sat back while the family turned against me. But what really made me angry? The pictures. Someone, probably my mom, had sent me a few photos of Ryan at her house, looking devastated. In one, he was sitting on the couch, staring at the floor, his hair messy, his face in his hands. In another, he was wrapped in a blanket, like some kind of war survivor. The final picture? Him staring out a window dramatically, like he was mourning his entire existence. It was so fake I almost laughed. Almost. But I wasn't laughing. Because while he was playing the tragic victim, I was getting bombarded with hate. And that's when I realized he wasn't just trying to save face. He was trying to destroy mine. I needed to act fast. So I did something Ryan never expected. I gathered receipts. I spent the next few hours going through bank statements, payment histories, and text messages, every transfer I had ever sent him, every bill I had covered, every ridiculous purchase he had made while claiming he was struggling. The $200 dinners, the designer clothes, the weekend trips, the VIP concert tickets. I screenshotted everything. Then, I wrote one message and sent it to every single person who had called me a monster. I wasn't going to do this, but since Ryan has decided to lie to everyone, here's the truth. Attached are screenshots of every payment I made for him, every bill I covered, and proof of where that money actually went. While I was working 2 jobs to support him, he was spending my money on luxuries while laughing behind my back. He called me a loser who would never be successful at dinner in front of everyone, so I stopped paying for him. That's it. If you still think I'm the villain here, that's your choice. But I won't be manipulated anymore. And I hit send. What happened next? Let's just say Ryan was about to learn what happens when you push the wrong person too far. It didn't take long for Ryan to find out I'd sent those messages. It was barely an hour later when my phone buzzed with an incoming call from him. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat there staring at the screen, watching the call go to voicemail. I knew what was coming. I could feel it in my gut. 5 minutes later, he called again. I ignored it again. The phone buzzed a third time. This time, I answered. "Jake." Ryan's voice was low, but there was a dangerous edge to it. I could practically hear the anger radiating through the phone. "You've made a huge mistake." I leaned back in my chair, trying to sound casual. "Oh? And what's that?" He scoffed. "You really think you can just air out all our dirty laundry like that? You think everyone is going to believe your lies?" "I didn't lie about anything, Ryan," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I just showed them the truth. You're the one who's been lying." There was a pause on the other end. Then he spoke in a more threatening tone. "You're going to regret this, you know. You've destroyed any chance of me ever helping you again. You've burned that bridge for good." I smirked, leaning forward in my chair. "You're threatening me now? After everything you've done to me? You really think I'm scared of you?" He was quiet for a moment, but then I heard a sharp exhale. "You don't get it, do you, Jake? You owe me. You think this is just about money? This is about loyalty. This is about family. And you're going to pay for what you've done to me. You'll come crawling back, begging for my help, and I won't lift a finger to help you. Not after this." The words stung, but I wasn't going to show it. You can try to make it sound like you're some kind of hero, but the truth is, you've always been using me. That's over now. There was a beat of silence, and then Ryan's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "You know where I'm coming from, right? You know I'm not leaving until we fix this. I'm coming over to your place." You better have something for me when I get there. I could feel my heart rate speed up. This was no longer just a fight over money, it was about control. Ryan wasn't used to not getting his way, and I had just taken that away from him. And now, he was coming to make me pay. Good luck with that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll be here, waiting. I'll even let you in. You'll find no sympathy from me, though. He didn't respond. The line went dead. I sat there, the weight of what was coming settling on me like a thick fog. He was on his way, and I knew it wasn't going to be pretty. It didn't take long before I heard a knock on my door. I opened it without hesitation, and there stood Ryan, looking like he'd just stepped out of a war zone. His eyes were wild, his face tight with anger. You really think you can just cut me off and expect everything to go back to normal? He snarled, barging past me into the apartment. You think I won't come here and make you fix this? I need that money, Jake. I deserve it. I shut the door behind him and crossed my arms. Deserve it? Are you serious? Ryan took a step closer, jabbing a finger into my chest. You're the one who's been living in denial, man. I've been taking care of you for years. You think I haven't made sacrifices for you? I was the one making sure you didn't lose everything. And now? Now you're going to ruin me over nothing. I kept my composure, standing tall. No, Ryan. I didn't ruin you. You did that yourself. I stopped giving you what you expected from me, and now you're here acting like I owe you something. But you don't get to take advantage of me anymore. He let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. You really think you're in control now? You think you can just shut me out and it'll be over? You don't know who you're dealing with. I'm family, Jake. I'm your brother. And if you think you can turn your back on me without any consequences, you've got another thing coming. I held my ground, watching him pace back and forth, getting more agitated. I need money. Now, he demanded, his voice rising. You have plenty of it. You've been saving all this time. You owe me at least something. You don't get to leave me stranded like this. I shook my head. I'm not giving you another dime. You've had enough of my money. It's time for you to figure things out on your own. Ryan's face twisted with rage. You think you can just walk away from this? You think I'm just going to let you go without making you pay? He moved closer again, his breath hot against my face. I could see the fury in his eyes, but I wasn't backing down. I'm not scared of you, Ryan, I said, my voice low and firm. You don't control me anymore. You never will again. He stopped, breathing heavily. For a moment, it seemed like he was considering his next move, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. But then, he seemed to make up his mind. You want to play it like this? He spat, taking a step back. Fine. But you're going to regret this, Jake. I swear to God, you'll regret this. I won't let you get away with treating me like this. Not this time. And with that, he turned on his heel and stormed out of my apartment, slamming the door behind him with such force that the whole building seemed to shake. I stood there, staring at the door, my heart pounding. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Ryan wasn't done. And whatever he had planned next, I knew it would be even more intense than what had just happened. The days that followed were a whirlwind of chaos. Ryan didn't give up easily, and I knew I hadn't heard the last of him. But he didn't show up at my door again. Instead, I started receiving a different kind of message, threats, manipulative texts, and passive-aggressive voicemails from him and even a few relatives. Everyone seemed to be taking his side, bombarding me with guilt about how I was tearing apart the family. I had expected this, but it didn't make it any easier. The emotional weight of what was happening was starting to wear on me. Ryan was good at playing the victim, and suddenly, he had everyone believing I was the one who had been heartless, that I was the one who had broken family bonds. But I refused to back down. I spent the next few days building a case, documenting every lie, every manipulation, and every outrageous demand Ryan had made over the years. I even reached out to a lawyer to make sure I wasn't doing anything that could come back to haunt me legally. Then came the final blow. I got a call from Ryan's girlfriend, who had been living with him for the past year. Apparently, they were in even more debt than I had known. She sounded desperate, trying to manipulate me into sending more money to help him out. She said he was ruining his life, and that I was the only one who could save him. It was like déjà vu. This was the same tactic he had used on me when he needed help, and I wasn't buying it anymore. I cut her off mid-sentence. I've done enough, and I'm done. If Ryan wants to keep playing these games, that's his choice, but I'm not enabling it anymore. The next thing I knew, the entire family was calling me. They were furious, and I could practically hear them shaking their heads in disbelief that I wasn't willing to help my own brother. It took all the strength I had to stay calm, but I told them the truth, how Ryan had never taken responsibility for his actions, how I had been the one propping him up for years, and how he had betrayed me when I needed him the most. Eventually, they began to see things from my perspective. Slowly, the messages stopped coming in, and the guilt trip stopped working. As for Ryan, he tried to reach out a few more times, leaving me messages telling me that I would regret this. But the last message he left me? Enjoy your life while it lasts, Jake. You'll be sorry. You'll be begging for help when you're all alone. Just wait. It was a hollow threat, empty, like everything else he had ever said to me. But here's where things got interesting. A week later, I received a call from one of his old friends, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Apparently, Ryan had been bragging about the new business venture he was launching, something to get himself back on track after all his failures. I couldn't help but laugh to myself. Ryan, who had constantly told me how useless and lazy I was now claiming to be starting his dream business? And I wasn't even sure if he had the skills to pull it off, let alone the drive. But at that moment, I realized he was never going to change. Ryan would always be the same person, selfish, manipulative, and incapable of taking responsibility for his own life. I stopped worrying about him, stopped letting him take up space in my mind. I moved on with my life, focusing on my own happiness, my goals, and my future. I wasn't going to let my brother's dysfunction hold me back any longer. Looking back now, I know I made the right choice. But I still wonder, could I have done more to help him? Did I take things too far? What do you all think? Was I wrong to cut him off? Or was I just finally standing up for myself after years of being used? Let me know your thoughts.